Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Wednesday webinar on using individual learning plans. Many schools are using individual learning plans as Word documents. That means that you can have dozens or hundreds of separate Word files stored on your school server that make it very difficult to combine them or summarize them into a single area for each student, or in fact for the whole school. Individual learning plans, as you know, are customized learning plans for each student who requires one that you can focus on a specific area of learning. Each student in GradeXpert can have dozens of ILPs stored in their learning profile going back as far as they've been at the school. So you can have ILPs for a student from prep through to year 6 through to year 10 and refer back to them at any point in time. Okay, so the individual learning plans in GradeXpert can be seen in this new column that says number of ILPs in progress for each student and if any of those ILPs are overdue for review. Let's load up a single student. I'll just double click on Krista, and when her information loads up, we'll move across to her ILP tab. And you can see the ILPs that are currently stored for Krista show 3 of them are completed and reviewed, and 1 of those ILPs is in progress. And you can tell that by looking at the status column. So there's the one that's in progress. I'm just going to open or edit this ILP to show you what it looks like by clicking Edit ILP. And you can see now that a new screen opens up allowing you to set up different learning areas and put in information into these separate columns. Now, an ILP usually is set up to indicate a student's current performance level in that area, how they're going at the moment, where do you as their teacher want them to be, what steps are you going to take to get them to that level, review notes that you can type in when the ILP is complete, and other columns that you can add in for your own use. And we can add and remove columns, and we can also change these headings quite easily, which we'll show you in a moment. But let's call up a new student. Let's say for Candace we want to create a new ILP. So on Candace's name, I'll just click Select Student. When Candace's data is loaded up, you can see at the moment she has no individual learning plans. So we can create a new one just by clicking Add Individual Learning Plan. And that brings up the screen that shows you the ILP entry screen. Now each ILP requires a description, and this can be pretty much anything that you want to use to identify the ILP. So let's call this Reading Term 3 2015, for example. For each ILP you can set up a start date, which is defaulted to today. You can forward date it if it's one that's going to kick in a week or a month. And the review date, once you put that in, determines the duration of this ILP. And you can change any of these dates just by typing in the correct date or clicking on the drop-down arrow and choosing the date that you want that ILP to be completed. The student's class is automatically filled in. You can put in an optional term there, and you can select your name from this list of teachers. You also have a section to type in free-form notes, and this is a section that can contain any other information that doesn't fit into these columns. So I'll just use this by example to say who else was present. So I'll say present, Mrs. Jones, Mr. Smith, and parents, for example. These notes can optionally be printed on the ILP, or they can just be used for reference. Now in the ILP grid, you can see we've got these columns set up already. But we can change this quite easily, and we can then save the updated layout as a template and use that in future as well. So let's say that these last two columns, for example, we don't actually want in our ILP. It's only these 4 columns plus the learning area that we require. So to remove a column, to remove any column, you just click on any column heading, or you right-click on the column heading and you untick the column you don't actually want to see. So let's get rid of General Notes. And you can see General Notes has now been removed, and the rest of the columns automatically resized to fill the available space. And let's remove the other column as well. So now we just have our 4 columns. Let's say also that we don't like the word goals. We want to change that terminology and call it desired outcomes. Again, you can right-click on that column heading and choose the Edit Header option. So this allows us to rename that header to anything else we want. And that will then be used for this ILP. You can see a second row below the headings gives us a bit more of a description of what that column is meant to reflect. So these items are called subheaders. Now if you don't want to see the subheaders at all, you can just right-click again and choose the option Hide Subheader. Then we just get our regular column headings. We put the subheader back. We can still right-click on that and actually change the description that goes into the subheader. And this is usually information for the parent or the teacher that helps them understand what the purpose of this column is meant to reflect. And that's how you can set up your column headings and your number of columns to match what you need at the school. Now let's say this is a layout that we wanted to use across the whole school. We don't want teachers to have to continually remove those extra 2 columns and change the goals heading to desired outcomes. Let's say we want to save this as a template. So if you click the Save Options button, you have an option here on the pop-up menu to save this layout as a template. Let's give it a name. And now we can reuse this layout whenever we choose. So to show you what that looks like, I'm just going to close all the way out of the student. And I'll reselect, well, I'll just do a different one, say for Cassandra. So I'll double click on Cassandra to open up her details. And on her ILP, I'll just click Add ILP. At this point, you can see it's still got the old column headings in. These are the default column headings that ship with GradeXpert, but you can quite easily load up the template that we've saved previously by just clicking Load from Template. This Load from Template option is only available on new ILPs when you're creating new ones. But you can see there is our reading ILP template. Now you can see that we've got one here that says Individual Learning Plan already with the word default next to it. So this is going to be the one that's used automatically when we add a new ILP. But let's say we want this new one to be used. We just highlight that one and say Set as Default. And that means now that this will be the layout that's used by default. So I'll just go through that process again. I'll say Add an ILP. And straight away you can see that it says Desired Outcomes. It's used the template that we've set up as the default template. And we can now start adding information to this ILP. You can have as many templates as you want, but only one of them can be the default template. You can use ILP templates for behavior management plans, for student support groups, for pretty much anything that you need to track an individual student's progress in a specific learning area. Let's assume now that this is our reading one. So let's just put in the description again. Let's say reading 3, and I'll choose my name. Notes, let's say present Now, to add different learning areas to any ILP, you simply click the Add Row button. And a new row will open up that allows you to either type in a learning area or select an assessment already set up in GradeXpert. So if you click Select here, you can choose any of the assessments that we've already got set up. Or if it's not related to a specific assessment, for example, it's not reading level or problem solving, for example, you can just type directly into that box. So this student is having trouble reading long words, and let's add in another one. Let's say writing long words. You can have any number of columns, any number of rows or learning areas in an ILP. Alright, so she's having a few problems, but let's just leave these three as an example, and now we can start entering information into these columns. So this is a live document, and that means that you can continue editing it until the ILP is completed. So to enter information directly into an ILP cell, you just click the button and you can start typing that information in. So let's put some details in. Sandra. Message has been asked. What happens when you select an option from the selection box? What does it link to? Well, if I add a new row here and I choose, let's just say reading level, it doesn't actually link to any assessment outcomes for that test. It simply stores that assessment name against this ILP row. So it's just a way to refer to an assessment that you've already created instead of typing one in. So I'm going to remove that row because I don't actually want that. And then we can say, well, what are the desired outcomes? Where do we want Cassandra to be in her long word reading? And then we simply continue entering information into all these boxes. So you can start entering bits, save that information, and then come back and edit it the following day or the following week, for example. I'll just save this so we've got it stored in our history. Now this ILP can be printed at any stage as well, and you've got a number of options to print the ILP. If I click the little drop down arrow on the box, you can see we can include the school logo, we can include the photo of the student if we have it, we can include the notes that we've typed, which are these notes up here. I'll just tick include notes. We can also change the page orientation, portrait or landscape. The font size on the ILPs can be changed. That's just the font size in the grid that is printed. And we have the option for a parent signature box, teacher signature, and or a student signature box. And when you actually do the print, just click Print Preview, you'll see the ILP comes up in a pretty standard format that lets you have a consistent look to your ILPs across the whole school. So we have our logo up there, we have the student photo in there, you can see the start and review date, the notes that we've put in, and here is the body of the ILP. This is all the information that we've typed in, along with places for parents or teachers to sign, and that means that you have a consistent look to your ILPs across the school. Any ILP in GradeXpert will look very similar to this and makes it very easy to read. So just to make a few changes, let's for example get rid of the subheader. And let's say move reading short words. I want this column to come up, this row to be shown under reading long words. So I just highlight the row I want to move and click up arrow. And now you can see it's changed the order. I'll change a few other things here. Let's change it to a landscape mode. Let's put in the student signature as well, because we want the student to sign to indicate that they're happy with this program. And let's get rid of the notes. And let's get rid of, say, the school logo. So when I click print again, you can see that the logo is removed, the order is changed, and we've got place for 3 different signatures. If your school doesn't have your school logo set up, well, usually it is set up because when we provide your database we include those. But if you don't have your school logo already set up or student photos imported, that's all done through the settings screen, or at least the school logo is done through the settings screen, and the student photos can be imported directly off your school photographer's CD. So let's make an adjustment here and say methods to use. She must practice whatever we want to put in there. So I'm just going to save that again. And when we look, if I close that and we look at the item in her history, you can see now she has 1 ILP set up with that start and review date, currently in progress. You can see who entered it, who the name of the teacher is. All that information is stored in the history. And as new ILPs are created and completed for each student, they simply add to the list of ILPs in their history. So you can go back and view ILPs from previous weeks, semesters, years, going back as far as you like. I'm just going to see who the next student is, Lena. Okay, so there are a couple of neat things that you can do with ILPs in GradeXpert. Let's say that another student requires this ILP, and you've set up an ILP with all the content that you want, but obviously it's for a different student. So there are a few options you've got to copy this entire ILP to a different student without having to copy and paste items manually or changing any other information. So let's say this whole thing, this whole ILP needs to be saved to a different student. Under your Save Options button, you have an option to create a copy for this student, which means this entire ILP will be saved as a copy for the current student, or you can create a copy for another student. And if I choose another student, I need to specify who that student is. So I'm just going to choose Lena Booth. And now what's happened is for this student, Lena Booth, a copy of this ILP exists in her history, but things like the name Cassandra has been changed to the other student, and things like she must practice at home would have changed to he must practice at home if the target student was a different gender. So let's just have a quick look at Lena. There you can see there's the ILP. You can see that it's been copied from that student. And if I double click on the ILP, you can see it's now replaced Cassandra's name with Lena. So any occurrence of the student name is changed, as are the different genders or pronouns when they're included in text. If we didn't want details that it was copied from that student, we can just highlight it and press the delete button to get rid of the information that's not actually relevant. So that's a really easy way to reuse ILPs that you've created without having to copy and paste information manually for different students. The other thing that you can do with ILPs, as you can do with many items in GradeXpert, is to add an attachment to an ILP. And attachments in GradeXpert work almost identically to attachments to emails. Any type of file, that can be a Word document, it can be a PDF file, it can be a video clip, it can be an image that you've scanned. You can attach it to an ILP just by clicking the attachments button down here. And that lets you drag and drop the attachment into the screen that is then saved with that ILP. So it may be work samples, it may be additional meeting notes that perhaps someone else took and saved in a Word document. You can simply attach them to this ILP, and that is then available to be opened at any point in the future as well by anyone who's reading this ILP. Okay, so that's the basic operation of putting ILPs into GradeXpert and keeping them updated as well. From a school leadership perspective, there are a number of options that you can use to obtain a summary view of the ILPs that are being used either in progress or reviewed at the school. And that's available from the summary menu, and you choose the ILP summary option. Just taking a moment, I think there's quite a few ILPs. And so this is a summary screen, 683 ILPs listed at the moment. You can see there's quite a few where the status is overdue. I'll just sort it by, say, the student's surname. You can see some are completed and reviewed, some are in progress, some are overdue for review. This is every single ILP on the system in GradeXpert, and you can filter this out quite easily just by choosing what you want to filter. So you can see we've got some ILPs here for 2014 term 4, 2015 term 3. Let's say I just wanted to see 2015. I can just click on the filter button at the top of the column and choose filter by 2015. So I'm just going to look at 2015 ILPs, and I just want to see 2015 ILPs for term 2. So I can also right click, sorry, I can't right click over here. I'll select term 2, and these are my 2015 term 2 ILPs. I can also filter by a specific teacher or specific class. Let's say I wanted to get just my year 4s. So I click on the class filter, and I'll select every year 4 class that we have. And here are our year 4 students that we have ILPs for. And you can then just double click on any of these ILPs to see the information in that ILP. Let's just reset the filters and find our other student who is, I think it was Lena, wasn't it? So let's just come down to Lena. So there's Lena Booth. There's the ILP that we've just set up, in fact. And you can see that it's in progress. You can double click on the ILP to bring up the printout, or you can print out your entire list of ILPs just by clicking print this list. And that just summarizes every ILP that's visible in the list. If you've hidden ILPs because you've filtered, then only the ones that are visible will be shown. So having your ILPs in a single area in a summary screen like this makes it very easy to manage them, because you can also say, only show me ILPs that are in progress, and only show me ILPs that are in progress for this teacher. So those are the 13 ILPs in progress for Corinne McPherson, and we can actually see that's her class. And there are a few other settings that you can adjust on ILPs. I'll just click on the settings screen. If we move across to the last tab, which says Other Settings, we have the ability to change the name of individual learning plans. So you may be a school that doesn't use this terminology. You may call it individual, say, education plan, and you abbreviate it to IEP instead of ILP. And your ILPs don't run for a default of 12 weeks, they run for a default of 4 weeks, for example. So you can change the default duration, which just changes the review date to be this number of weeks from your start date. When we then load up the student's IEP, you can see the column heading now says IEPs in progress. If I double click on one, you'll notice it says IEP, IEP description. If I double click on this, you can see that all the terminology now says individual education plan, as opposed to individual learning plan. So that ability to replace the description of an ILP with whatever you use at the school is all done through that settings screen. Now for this particular student, I'm just going to change the dates to say the 16th of the 8th to the 14th of the 9th. So what I've done here is I've changed the review date to a date that's already passed. And what that means is the review is now overdue. You know that it's overdue because you can see the red item here. I'm just going to go back into the student list. If I look at Cassandra's item now, if I call up her history, we can change the status from review is overdue to review completed simply by ticking the review completed box. What that means is that the ILP that has previously been marked as overdue because this review date has passed and the teacher hasn't yet come in and ticked review completed, changes its status to review completed. And you can see now that status means that this ILP is basically done with. You can certainly reuse it at a time in the future, at another time in the future, but it's basically indicated that we've now finished with this ILP. You can quite easily open it up again if this ILP needs to be extended. You can change the review date to 14th of the 12th, for example. It's no longer completed. So you may decide that this ILP is going to be extended into the next term, or you can just create a copy. So let's make this completed and reviewed. And what we can do then is we can create a copy for the student. And you can see now copy of reading becomes the name. So I'm going to remove copy of, and let's change it from the 16th of the 10th to the 14th of the 11th, and it'll be term 4. So you can see there's the one that we've just finished off, and this is the one that we have yet to begin. So we've set up an ILP for a future start date, and that means that we can have ILPs set up quite easily for future dates, and they only become active when that date passes. You do have the ability to delete ILPs or IEPs, but you'll need access level 3. So let's say we've decided to not actually keep this item, this IEP, in our history. Just click delete IEP, and that one is then removed. All right, does anyone have any questions on the ILPs that we've seen so far? That mostly covers off the ILP entry and the setting up of templates and looking at the ILP summary screen. We'd certainly be happy to hear any suggestions for improvements from our users, from our customers. So if you do have any ideas of things that you'd like to see, please let us know. One of the things that we're going to be looking at implementing is including actual student results in an ILP. So to be able to see what scores they were achieving in a particular area prior to the ILP commencing, and then link that to their scores once the ILP is completed to see their growth that you would attribute to the ILP itself. So that's one thing that we've been asked for and that we're looking at putting in. As always, I'd like to thank you very much for your time and attention, and we'll see you at the next Wednesday webinar. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a nice day.